When we've heard Premier Danielle Smith talk about the prospect of a unity crisis, Preston Manning saying effectively the same thing, what is that conversation? What are people talking about?
Well, this idea of Western separatism, I mean, it's been around a very long time, and it sort of ebbs and it flows, but there's always a small group of Albertans that are talking about it, and sometimes they're noisier than not. But what you have to keep in mind is none of those people would vote NDP in an election. But those people are in the UCP camp. They still don't represent a majority of people in the UCP, but they're this sort of sizable minority that Danielle Smith keeps her eye on, and she talks to them a lot in her messaging.
What is it that she's suggesting will happen?
Well, Danielle Smith got elected on this mandate of saying we have to fight Ottawa. We have to fight harder for the development of our resources here in Alberta. And so what she's saying to the federal government is if we don't see movement on those things, we are going to start agitating again. We are going to make this a national unity issue. We want Alberta's economic interests to be better recognized by the rest of Canada.
And how much traction do you see that getting here?
Well, as I said, there's this small group of Albertans who have always had this sort of Western independence sentiment that they've shared. I'm not sure that group is growing, but that group is definitely getting noisier.
Where does this province fit within the national conversation in this moment, though?
Well, Canada's largest industry, oil and gas, is centered here in Alberta. And when you're in the middle of a trade dispute, when Canada's economy is threatened the way it is, the health of the strongest industry in the country is going to be really important, not just to Albertans, but to everybody. And Alberta's going to want to make sure that the rest of the country is paying attention to their interests and not trying to stymie the development of the oil and gas industry.
Is there a perception that Canadians still don't get Alberta? And by Canadians, I mean people who don't live in Alberta.
Absolutely. There is this very strong sense that other Canadians don't appreciate Alberta, don't understand our most important industries. You talk to people outside of Alberta and they're shocked to know that oil and gas is the single biggest industry in the country. They're surprised to find out how much more Alberta contributes in transfer payments than they receive back in government services. I think here in Alberta, we're very well versed on the economics of oil and gas and Alberta's economic position in the rest of Canada, but we don't feel that the rest of Canada understands that.
So I appreciate that federally, Alberta doesn't necessarily make or break an election, but there is sort of some alchemy this time that might make more seats in this province in play, right?
Well, usually the country doesn't invest a lot of attention into Alberta during a federal election because there's only a handful of seats that are up for grabs. But now when it looks like it's uncertain whether this is going to be a majority government or a minority government, then suddenly 6 or 8 seats makes a difference. So yeah, normally there's not a lot of attention paid to Alberta, but in this election, those handful of seats, who knows, they could make the difference.
And the ones you're talking about are in the urban centers, so Calgary, Edmonton in particular.
Right. I'm thinking about a riding like Calgary Confederation, which is in downtown Calgary. If the Liberals are going to win a majority, they almost have to win that seat to get to a majority. It's like that's almost like a bellwether riding for whether the Liberals are going to win a minority or a majority.
So 4 seats in Calgary, 4 in Edmonton might tell you what kind of story?
Well, it might tell you the story of whether the government's going to be a majority or a minority. It's hard to imagine the Liberals getting enough seats to get to a majority without winning at least 4 or 5 seats in Alberta.
Let's talk about vote splitting for a second. Where do you see it likely to happen, and under what circumstances do you see it starting to happen?
So the 2 ridings that I think are most vulnerable to vote splitting are Edmonton-Griesbach and Edmonton-Strathcona. They both currently have an NDP MP running again, incumbents, popular. The NDP will really want to win those elections. But I could see progressive voters in Edmonton getting worried about a Conservative victory and switching from the NDP to a Liberal. And then if you've got too much vote splitting, then maybe the Conservatives can come up the middle and win those seats. So, I don't know how many 3-way seats there are in Canada, but, there's not too many in Alberta. But those are 2 solid 3-way votes, and that makes a seat like that very unpredictable.
Okay, lots to watch for.